Oil tycoon disappeared during a Texas storm. Months later, his untouched truck idled on a dirt road. In the vast, sun-baked expanse of West Texas, where the horizon stretched like an endless promise of black gold, Harlan Reeves had built an empire from the dust. At 52, he was the kind of man who seemed carved from the red clay earth itself, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face etched by decades under the relentless sun and the sting of sandstorms. His company, Reeves Drilling, wasn't the biggest in the Permian Basin, but it was his, clawed out of wildcat wells and risky leases that had paid off more often than not. Harlan lived in a sprawling ranch house on the outskirts of Midland, a two-story stucco affair with white columns that nodded to old Texas money, though his fortune was anything but inherited. The house sat on 200 acres dotted with pump jacks nodding like mechanical horses, their rhythmic creak a constant lullaby in the dry wind. Harlan's days started before dawn, the sky still bruised with night as he sipped black coffee on the wraparound porch, watching the first light bleed over the flatlands. His wife, Elena, would join him sometimes, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, handing him a plate of eggs and chorizo she'd cooked up in the kitchen that smelled of cumin and fresh tortillas. Elena was 48, a third-generation Texan with Mexican roots that showed in her warm laugh and the way she navigated family gatherings with effortless grace. They'd met at a rodeo in Odessa back in the 90s, when Harlan was just a roughneck with calloused hands and big dreams. Now, with 2 kids grown and gone, their son, Jake, running a frac crew up in the Bakken, and daughter Mia, studying law in Austin, the ranch felt quieter, but no less alive. "Another scorcher today," Harlan would mutter, squinting at the horizon where thunderheads sometimes gathered like uninvited guests. Elena would nod, her eyes tracing the worry lines on his face. Lately those lines had deepened. The oil business was booming again, prices climbing with global demand, but Harlan was feeling the weight of it all. Competitors were snapping up leases faster than he could bid, and whispers of environmental regs tightening had him pacing at night. He drove a black Ford F-350, king cab with leather seats worn from years of hauling gear to remote sites. That truck was his office on wheels, dashboard cluttered with maps, a thermos of coffee, and a satellite phone that buzzed with updates from his crews. Out on the rigs, Harlan was king. His lead roughneck, Tommy Ruiz, a wiry guy in his 30s with tattoos snaking up his arms, idolized him. Tommy had started as a floor hand under Harlan a decade ago, back when the bust of '08 nearly broke them both. "Boss, you see that new play over by Monahan's? We could hit it big," Tommy would say during lunch breaks under the shade of a derrick, wiping sweat from his brow with a bandana. Harlan would chew on a sandwich, his blue eyes sharp. "Yeah, but it's risky. Storm season's coming. We push too hard and Mother Nature'll remind us who's in charge." Their banter was laced with the easy camaraderie of men who'd shared foxholes in the oil patch, stories of blowouts and dry holes swapped over cold beers at the Water and Hole bar in town, where neon signs flickered against the night and country music twanged from jukeboxes. Family was Harlan's anchor, though he didn't wear his heart on his sleeve. Sundays meant grilling brisket in the backyard, the air thick with mesquite smoke as neighbors dropped by with coolers of Shiner Bock. Elena's sister, Rosa, lived nearby in a modest trailer, and she'd bring her famous tres leches cake, teasing Harlan about his fancy life. "You think you're a big shot now, huh? Driving that monster truck like you're king of the oil gods," she'd say, her voice warm with affection. Harlan would chuckle, a rare deep rumble, and pull her into a hug. "Ain't nothing fancy about getting your hands dirty, Rosa. That's how we eat." Mia and Jake made it home when they could, Jake with his wife and toddler in tow, the little boy chasing chickens around the coop, while Harlan bounced him on his knee, telling tales of his own wild youth, stealing kisses at dances, dodging tornadoes on the plains. But beneath the routine, cracks were showing. Harlan had been quieter lately, staring out at the pump jacks as if they whispered secrets. Elena noticed it first, the way he'd linger in his study after dinner, poring over ledgers by the light of a desk lamp. One evening, as thunder rumbled distant in the summer heat, she found him there, rubbing his temples. "What's eating you, Harlan?" Business or something else? He looked up, his face softening. Just the usual, darling. Got a big lease up for grabs tomorrow. If we don't snag it, might have to lay off some boys. She sat on the arm of his chair, her hand on his shoulder. You'll get it. You always do. But in his eyes, Elena saw the flicker of doubt, the fear that time was catching up. The ranch itself was a character in their lives, with its creaky wooden floors polished by generations of boots and the old windmill out back that groaned in the breeze. Mornings brought the scent of creosote bushes after a rare rain, and evenings the chorus of crickets under a sky ablaze with stars. Harlan loved it all, the raw, unforgiving beauty of Texas that mirrored his own stubborn spirit. He'd built a life here, one of hard-won successes and quiet joys, where the hum of the industry was as familiar as his own heartbeat. Little did they know that heartbeat was about to falter in the face of a storm that would change everything. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the heart of Texas mystery. Stories like Harlan's remind us how fragile life can be. If you're hooked and want more tales that keep you up at night, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world. As summer wore on, Harlan threw himself into work, scouting sites under the blistering sun. The air shimmered with heat, mirages dancing on the asphalt of Highway 80 as he drove between meetings. In town, Midland buzzed with the energy of boom times, trucks rumbling through dusty streets, coffee shops filled with geologists in khakis debating seismic data. Harlan stopped at the feed store one afternoon, loading up on supplies for the ranch, chatting with old-timer Buck behind the counter. "Heard you're eyeing that land north of here," Buck said, his voice gravelly from years of pipe smoke. Harlan nodded, hefting a bag of feed. "Gotta keep moving, Buck. Stand still, and the game's over." It was true. Stagnation wasn't in his blood. Evenings brought a semblance of peace. Elena tended her garden out front, rows of tomatoes and peppers thriving despite the drought, while Harlan tinkered in the garage, his hands black with grease as he tuned up the truck. Their talks turned to the future. Mia graduating soon. Jake may be coming back to run the company one day. "I'd like that," Harlan admitted one night, the two of them rocking on the porch as cicadas droned. "Seeing the kids take the reins?" Elena smiled, squeezing his hand. In those moments, their world felt solid, unbreakable, like the ancient oak shading the driveway. Yet, Harlan carried a private weight. A rival outfit, backed by out-of-state money, had been undercutting his bids, and rumors swirled of shady dealings, poached workers, falsified reports. He didn't voice it much, but it gnawed at him, fueling late-night drives along back roads where coyotes howled and the stars pressed close. Life before that fateful storm was a tapestry of grit and love, woven tight in the Texas soil, setting the stage for a vanishing that would unravel it all. The summer of 2023 had been unusually dry in West Texas, the kind of heat that cracked the earth and made the air taste like dust. But by late August, the skies finally darkened, pregnant with the promise of rain that the parched land desperately needed. Harlan Reeves had been out on a scouting run that morning, his black F-350 kicking up gravel along the back roads north of Midland. He'd heard the forecasts, thunderstorms rolling in from the west, the kind that could turn a routine drive into a nightmare. But Harlan wasn't one to hunker down. The oil game didn't wait for fair weather. He had his eye on that disputed lease near the Pecos River, a stretch of rugged terrain where seismic surveys hinted at untapped reserves. If he could get eyes on it one more time before the bid closed, it might just tip the scales. Elena had watched him go from the kitchen window, her coffee mug warm in her hands. "Be careful out there, Harlan. That sky looks mean," she'd called as he loaded his gear into the truck. Laptop, hard hat. A rain slicker tossed in the back just in case. He waved her off with a grin, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "I'll be back before you miss me, darling. Got Tommy meeting me at the site." The engine roared to life, a deep rumble that echoed across the ranch, and he was gone, tail lights fading into the haze. Elena turned back to her chores, folding laundry while the radio hummed low in the background, warning of flash floods in low-lying areas. She trusted Harlan's instincts. He'd weathered worse than a summer squall. Out on the lease, the land was a sea of mesquite and scrub brush, the ground baked hard under a sky that boiled from blue to bruised purple in the span of an hour. Harlan met Tommy at the gate, the younger man's pickup already parked, its hood propped open as he tinkered with the battery. "Boss, you sure about this?" "Wind's picking up something fierce," Tommy said, slamming the hood down and wiping his hands on his jeans. Harlan glanced at the horizon, where clouds towered like dark anvils, lightning flickering silent in their depths. "We won't be long. Just need to check that outcrop, see if the rock formation matches the data." They climbed into Harlan's truck, the cab smelling of leather and stale coffee, and bumped along the dirt track, the suspension groaning over ruts worn by years of heavy equipment. The first drops hit as they parked near the site, fat and sporadic, splattering the windshield like scattered buckshot. Harlan stepped out anyway, pulling on his slicker, the hood flapping in the gusts that whipped sand across the open plain. Tommy followed, grabbing a clipboard from the seat. "Looks promising," Harlan shouted over the rising wind, pointing to a low ridge where layers of sedimentary rock jutted from the earth like the spine of some buried beast. They paced it out, Harlan sketching notes on a weathered notepad, his boots sinking into the softening soil. The air grew heavy, charged with ozone, and the thunder rolled closer now, a low growl that vibrated through the ground. "We should head back," Tommy urged, his voice tight. "This ain't playing around." Harlan nodded, but his eyes lingered on the horizon, calculating. 5 more minutes. This could be the key to that lease. By the time they returned to the truck, the storm had unleashed its fury. Rain hammered down in sheets, turning the track into a river of red mud that slurped at the tires. Harlan slid behind the wheel, water streaming from his hat, and fired up the engine. "Hang tight, Tommy. We'll beat it to the highway." But as they crested a slight rise, the sky split open with a crack of lightning that lit the world in stark white, followed by thunder so loud it rattled the windows. The wipers slashed frantically against the deluge, visibility dropping to mere feet. Harlan gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, navigating by memory along the twisting path that paralleled an arroyo now swelling with runoff. Tommy braced against the door, his face pale under the dash lights. "Boss, slow down. This mud's slicker than ice." Harlan grunted in agreement, easing off the gas, but the truck fishtailed anyway, the rear end sliding toward the embankment. He corrected hard, tires spinning for a heart-stopping moment before catching. "Damn near," he muttered, exhaling sharply. The radio crackled with emergency alerts. Tornado warnings for the county, winds gusting to 70 miles an hour. They were maybe 10 miles from the main road when the unthinkable happened. A gust slammed into the side of the truck like a freight train, shoving it toward the edge where the arroyo churned below, frothing brown and furious. Harlan yanked the wheel, but the ground gave way beneath them. Mudslide swallowing the shoulder in a roar of debris. The F-350 teetered, then lurched sideways, front tires dangling over the drop. "Jump!" Harlan bellowed, killing the engine as water poured through the cracks. Tommy scrambled out his door, slipping in the muck but catching himself on a scrub oak, heart pounding as he clawed his way uphill. He turned back, yelling for Harlan, but the rain drowned his voice. The truck shifted, groaning like a dying animal, and then nothing. It plummeted into the gully, a sickening crunch of metal on rock echoing through the storm. Tommy staggered to higher ground, fumbling for his phone, but the signal was dead, bars flickering to zero in the chaos. Lightning forked overhead, illuminating the wreckage below. The truck wedged against boulders, headlights piercing the torrent like accusatory eyes. No sign of Harlan. "Harlan!" Tommy screamed into the wind, sliding back down, ignoring the sting of branches whipping his face. He reached the edge, peering into the murk, but the water raged too fierce, pulling branches and debris into a vortex. Desperate, he waded in up to his knees, grabbing at anything solid, but the current nearly swept him under. Coughing, soaked to the bone, he retreated, the reality sinking in like the mud around his boots. Harlan was gone. Back at the ranch, Elena paced the kitchen as the storm battered the windows, wind howling through the eaves. The clock ticked past 6 p.m., then 7, dinner growing cold on the stove. She tried Harlan's satellite phone, no answer. Tommy's truck pulled up around 8, mud-caked and alone. The young man stumbling out, face ashen. "Elena." "It's bad." The truck went into the arroyo. "Harlan." He didn't make it out. The words hung in the air, heavier than the rain pounding the roof. Elena froze, the world tilting, her hand flying to her mouth as a sob escaped. Neighbors rallied as word spread, flashlights cutting through the downpour. But the arroyo was a beast unleashed, swallowing searches whole. By midnight, emergency crews arrived, sheriff's deputies in rain gear, volunteers from the fire department hauling ropes and winches. They lowered a man into the gully, his light bobbing like a firefly in the gloom. But the truck was battered, cab crumpled, and Harlan nowhere to be seen. Had he been thrown clear? Swept away? The questions clawed at them as the storm raged on, turning the night into a blur of shouts and sirens. Tommy sat on the porch steps, head in hands, replaying the moment. The truck's lurch, Harlan's shout. "I tried, Elena. God, I tried." She nodded numbly, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, staring into the darkness where her husband had vanished. Dawn broke gray and sodden, the rain easing to a drizzle that left the land steaming. Crews worked through the morning, pulling the wrecked F-350 from the mud, but inside was empty. No body, no blood, just Harlan's thermos tipped on the floorboard, coffee long spilled. The sheriff, a grizzled vet named Ray Caldwell with a mustache like steel wool, scratched his head under his hat. "Looks like he got out, but that water, it don't give nothing back easy." Elena stood at the edge, wind tugging her hair. The arroyo's banks scarred and silent now. Hope flickered, fragile as a match in the breeze. But deep down, a chill settled, the kind that whispered of endings without closure. Harlan Reeves, the unyielding oil man, had disappeared into the storm, leaving only questions churning like the flood that had claimed him. The days following Harlan Reeves's disappearance blurred into a frantic haze of activity across the sodden West Texas landscape. The arroyo, once a dry scar in the earth, now ran sluggish and swollen, its banks churned to a sticky slurry that clung to boots and hope alike. Sheriff's deputies cordoned off the site with yellow tape flapping in the residual wind, while Elena Reeves stood vigil at the edge, her face pale under the wide brim of a borrowed hat. She hadn't slept, her eyes red-rimmed from staring into the murky water, willing it to give up her husband. He could still be out there, she murmured to anyone who would listen, her voice cracking like the parched ground beyond the flood zone. Rosa, her sister, hovered nearby, an arm around Elena's waist, murmuring prayers in Spanish under her breath. The air smelled of wet clay and diesel from the idling emergency vehicles, a grim reminder that the storm's fury had passed. But its aftermath lingered like a bad debt. Sheriff Ray Caldwell took charge, his department stretched thin but bolstered by volunteers from neighboring counties. A stocky man in his late 50s, Ray had seen his share of oil field accidents, blowouts, rig collapses. But this felt different, personal. Harlan wasn't just a name on a report. He'd bought Ray's family rounds at the Watering Hole more than once, swapping stories about bust cycles and family woes. "We're treating this like a missing person, full protocol," Ray announced at the morning briefing under a pop-up tent near the ranch gate, his voice carrying over the hum of generators. Maps were spread out on a folding table, marked with red pins for the crash site and blue for potential sweep areas. "Ground teams first, then air support if we can get it. That arroyo's a snake, winds through canyons for miles, could have carried him downstream." The search kicked off at first light, a convoy of pickups and ATVs fanning out from the arroyo. Tommy Ruiz led one team, his face gaunt and shadowed by guilt, directing roughnecks from Reeves Drilling who had dropped tools to join. They trudged through mesquite thickets, calling Harlan's name into the scrub, their shouts swallowed by the vastness. The terrain was unforgiving. Thorny bushes snagging clothes, hidden sinkholes from the rain threatening to swallow a man whole. Tommy paused at a bend in the dry creek bed, kicking at debris washed up by the flood. A rusted fence post, tangled branches, a child's lost sneaker from who knows where. "He was right here, yelling for me to jump," Tommy confessed to Jake, who had driven down from the Bakken overnight, his work boots still caked in North Dakota mud. Jake, Harlan's son, clapped a hand on Tommy's shoulder, his jaw set tight. "You did what you could, man. Dad wouldn't want you beating yourself up." But Tommy's eyes, dark with regret, said otherwise. He'd replayed that moment 100 times, wondering if he'd reacted faster, reached back sooner. Elena joined the ground search when she could, ignoring Rosa's pleas to rest. She walked the banks with a group of neighbors, including old Buck from the feed store, who carried a walking stick more for show than support. The sun beat down mercilessly now, turning the morning chill to a sweltering bake that raised steam from the puddles. "Harlan! Harlan Reeves!" Their voices echoed, a chorus laced with desperation. Elena's calls were softer, intimate, as if the wind might carry them to him alone. "Come on, darling, give us a sign." They found scraps of the storm's wrath. A shredded rain slicker snagged on a rock, a chunk of truck bumper glinting in the sun, but nothing of Harlan, no boot prints in the mud, no scrap of clothing. The Arroyo's current had been too violent, scouring the channel clean, leaving only questions in its wake. By midday, helicopters thumped overhead, their rotors chopping the air like angry blades. The Texas Department of Public Safety loaned a Black Hawk, its downdraft scattering dust devils across the flats. From the air, the searchers scanned for anomalies, a flash of color in the brush, a disturbance in the riverbed where the Pecos widened downstream. Pilot Mike Harlan, no relation, but the coincidence hung heavy, banked low over the canyons, his voice crackling over the radio. "Nothing yet, Sheriff. Visibility's good, but this country's bigger than it looks." Ground teams paused to watch, shielding their eyes, a flicker of optimism cutting through the exhaustion. Mia arrived from Austin that afternoon, her law books abandoned, hugging her mother fiercely amid the chaos. "We'll find him, Mom. We have to." But as the chopper lifted away empty-handed, the weight settled heavier, the sky mocking them with its empty blue. Divers were called in next, a team from Lubbock hauling gear in a flatbed truck that rumbled up Highway 80, kicking gravel as it turned onto the dirt access road. The Pecos River, where the Arroyo fed in, was deeper there, its waters murky with silt and the occasional catfish gliding through. Clad in wetsuits against the deceptive chill, the divers plunged in at dusk, bubbles rising like hesitant confessions. Floodlights rigged on the banks cast eerie glows across the surface, turning the scene into a watery stage. Elena waited on the shore, wrapped in a wool blanket despite the humidity, her fingers twisting a rosary Rosa had pressed into her hand. "They'll see something," Rosa whispered, but the hours dragged, the divers surfacing only to shake their heads, masks fogged with frustration. Currents too strong downstream pulled everything into the deeper pools, lead diver Carla explained to Sheriff Caldwell, peeling off her fins as stars pricked the twilight sky. "We checked the wreck site again, but the cab's crushed, if he was inside." "Well, no sign." Ray nodded grimly, jotting notes on a waterproof pad. "What about tracks? Anything washed up further out?" Carla shrugged, her voice tired. "Nothing conclusive. Could be anywhere from here to the Rio Grande if the flood took him." The words landed like blows, the river's vastness a thief that gave no quarter. Tommy, overhearing, slammed a fist into his palm. "This ain't right." "Harlan's tough. He don't just vanish." As night fell, the search shifted to command center mode at the ranch, the kitchen table buried under satellite images and volunteer sign-up sheets. Neighbors brought casseroles and coffee, their faces etched with the shared ache of a community bound by oil and loss. Jake coordinated calls to every hospital within 100 miles, his voice steady but breaking on the edges. "Any John does from the storm? Male, mid-50s, possible head injury." Negative after negative, each one a needle in the haystack of hope. Elena retreated to the porch, the same spot where she'd shared coffee with Harlan just days before, now listening to the crickets resume their indifferent song. The pumpjacks nodded on, oblivious, their creak a hollow echo of the life they'd built. Weeks stretched into a rhythm of diminishing returns. Ground sweeps expanded to 20-mile radii, ATVs buzzing through ranchlands where cattle lowed warily. Bloodhounds from the K9 unit sniffed Harlan's hat, left in the truck, their bays trailing off into silence as scents washed away by rain. Media picked up the story. Local news vans parked along the driveway, reporters with microphones thrusting questions at Elena. "Any leads, ma'am? Foul play suspected?" She shook her head, voice firm. "Just find him, that's all I ask." But whispers crept in. Rivals in the oil patch, the disputed lease. Could someone have wanted Harlan out? Sheriff Caldwell dismissed it early, no evidence. But the seed of doubt took root, fueling late-night talks among the searchers. By month's end, the official efforts scaled back. Resources diverted to other calls. A house fire in Odessa, a meth bust in Andrews. Volunteers trickled to a handful, the initial surge of solidarity fading under the grind of daily life. Tommy quit the rigs altogether, haunting the arroyo alone some days, a thermos of coffee in hand as if Harlan might wander back. Elena stared at the empty chair at dinner, Mia and Jake trading shifts to keep her from unraveling. The truck, towed to an impound lot, sat under a tarp, its secrets locked in crumpled steel. Hope didn't die, but it withered, the search yielding only failure. No body, no trace, just the vast Texas silence swallowing Harlan Reeves whole. The family clung to fragments, a missed call on the satellite phone, a half-finished note about the lease. But answers. They slipped away like rain into the sand, leaving grief to fester in the heat. Fall turned the West Texas landscape into a palette of muted golds and rusts, the mesquite leaves curling under the first hints of chill that seeped into the nights. At the Reeves Ranch, the days settled into a hollow routine, the kind that masked the ache but never dulled it. Elena Reeves moved through her mornings like a shadow, brewing coffee for one in the oversized pot that had always served the family. The kitchen, once alive with the clatter of plates and Harlan's low chuckles, now echoed with silence broken only by the tick of the wall clock and the distant whine of a pump jack. She'd pour a cup, black and steaming, and carry it to the porch, staring out at the flat expanse where the arroyo had scarred the earth like a fresh wound. The floodwaters had receded weeks ago, leaving cracked mudflats that baked under the autumn sun. But Elena half expected to see Harlan's silhouette rising from the haze, hat in hand, calling her name. Rosa visited daily now, her trailer just a short drive away becoming a lifeline. She'd bustle in with bags of groceries, fresh masa for tortillas, chilies from her garden, insisting on cooking to fill the empty spaces. "You gotta eat, Hermana," she'd say, her voice gentle but firm as she kneaded dough on the counter, flour dusting her apron. Elena would nod, forcing a smile, but her appetite had vanished with Harlan. Meals were shared in quiet companionship, the two women at the scarred oak table, forks scraping plates while Rosa recounted neighborhood gossip to chase away the quiet. "Buck at the feed store says the new crew's drillin' dry holes left and right. Serves 'em right for undercutting your man." Elena's laugh was faint, more breath than sound, her eyes drifting to Harlan's empty chair, where his flannel shirt still hung over the back like a ghost waiting to sit. Jake and Mia rotated in and out, their presence a fragile bridge over the grief. Jake, back from the Bakken with his wife and toddler, threw himself into the business, poring over ledgers in Harlan's study under the glow of the desk lamp. The company teetered without its founder, contracts delayed, crews restless, but Jake's steady hand kept the rigs humming. "Dad built this from nothing. I ain't letting it fold," he'd tell Elena during evening walks around the property, the crunch of gravel under their boots, the only sound in the cooling air. His wife, Sarah, managed the house, chasing their son through the yard where he'd once toddled under Harlan's watchful eye. The boy, little Harlan after his grandfather, would point at the pump jacks and babble Gampa work, tugging at Elena's heartstrings until tears welled. She'd scoop him up, burying her face in his soft hair that smelled of baby shampoo and dust, whispering, "Yeah, sugar. Grandpa's working hard." Mia, buried in her law studies, drove down every weekend, her sleek sedan cutting through the ranch lands like an intruder in the rugged terrain. She'd bring takeout from Austin, barbecue that filled the air with smoky hickory, and they'd talk late into the night on the living room couch, the fire crackling in the stone hearth against the rare October chill. "Mom, I pulled some strings at school. Got a prof who's connected in environmental law. Might help with that lease Dad was chasing." Elena would listen, nodding. But her mind wandered to the satellite phone logs the sheriff had shared. The last call from Harlan, a garbled static burst at 4:17 p.m. on the day of the storm. What if he made it out? What if someone's holding him? Mia would squeeze her hand, her voice soft. We're not giving up, but we gotta live too. Yet sleep evaded them both, the house groaning in the wind like it mourned alongside. In town, Midland carried on with its boomtown pulse, but Harlan's absence rippled through the oil patch like an aftershock. At the watering hole, the neon sign buzzed as always, but the booths felt emptier, conversations dipping when Elena walked in for supplies. Tommy Ruiz had taken a job hauling frac sand up in Andrews, the rumble of his semi-truck a way to outrun the memories. But he'd stop by the ranch on off days, thermos in hand. Found this in my glove box, Harlan's old bandana from that '08 bust, he'd say one crisp afternoon, unfolding the faded red cloth on the porch steps. Elena took it, fingers tracing the worn edges, the faint scent of sweat and earth lingering. He'd want you driving safe, Tommy. Don't let this eat you. Tommy's nod was tight, his tattoos stark against his sun-browned skin. Every mile I think about that arroyo. Wish I'd pulled him out. Their talks turned to practicalities, funeral plans without a body, the company's future. But underneath ran the undercurrent of what-ifs, the mystery festering like an untreated wound. Sheriff Ray Caldwell's office saw the file grow thicker, yellowed edges curling from humidity. Tips trickled in, a sighting in Pecos, a truck matching the F-350 in New Mexico. But each led to dead ends, chases through dusty motels or abandoned lots under sodium lights. Ray would drive out to the ranch monthly, his cruiser kicking up gravel, hat tipped back as he sipped coffee with Elena. Nothing new, ma'am, but we're keeping ears open. That lease, it went to the rivals, but no funny business turned up. Elena's eyes, sharper now with resolve, would meet his. Something don't add up, Ray. Harlan didn't just wash away. The sheriff grunted agreement, but resources were thin. Cases piled up, and Harlan's became one of those lingering files, a cold echo in the filing cabinet. Holidays loomed like storm clouds. Thanksgiving approaching with its promise of gathered kin. Elena strung lights on the porch, the warm glow pushing back the encroaching dark, while Jake fired up the grill for practice runs, mesquite smoke curling into the starlit sky. Neighbors dropped by with pies, their hugs lingering, words of comfort wrapped in Tupperware. Harlan was a good man, he's watching over y'all. But in quiet moments, doubt crept in. The arroyo's silence, the truck's empty cab. Elena kept Harlan's study untouched, his maps pinned to the wall, pencil marks noting potential strikes. She'd sit there sometimes, the leather chair creaking under her, imagining his voice. Keep pushing, darlin'. That's how we win. The ranch endured, its windmill turning lazy in the breeze. But time passed unevenly, carving deeper lines into faces and hearts. Winter's first frost dusted the fields in December, turning the world brittle and white under the pale sun. Jake expanded the operations, hiring on fresh faces to replace the gaps, the rig's lights piercing the night like beacons of persistence. Mia aced her exams, dedicating her finals paper to Harlan, a quiet tribute in footnotes and resolve. Tommy sent postcards from the road, scrawled notes of "still lookin'" that Elena tucked into a drawer. Life inched forward, a grudging march through grief's territory, the Texas wind whispering of endurance. Yet the questions lingered, shadows lengthening as months blurred. Where was Harlan? The family held tight, bound by blood and the unyielding land, waiting for the day the silence might break. The first hints of spring thawed the rigid grip of winter on the West Texas plains, coaxing green shoots from the cracked soil and stirring the air with the faint, earthy scent of renewal. But at the Reeves Ranch, the seasons turned without easing the knot of uncertainty that had taken root in Elena's chest. It was early March 2024, 6 months since Harlan vanished into that fateful storm, and the family had learned to navigate the days with a practiced numbness. Jake had steadied the company, securing a modest strike on a secondary lease that kept the crews paid and the pump jacks humming through the frosty nights. Mia, now deeper into her law program, had started volunteering at a local firm in Midland, poring over missing person statutes during lunch breaks at a diner where the coffee was strong and the booths worn smooth by years of oil workers' elbows. Elena kept busy with the ranch, her hands in the dirt of the garden as she planted rows of okra and squash, the sun warming her back through a faded denim shirt that had once been Harlan's. The windmill out back spun lazily in the breeze, its grown a familiar companion during solitary afternoons when she'd sit on the porch steps, thermos in hand, scanning the horizon for shapes that never materialized. Rosa still came by, her visits a ritual of tamales steaming on the stove and stories swapped over herbal tea, but the conversations had shifted from hope to endurance. "He's out there, Elena. I feel it in my bones," Rosa would say. Her eyes fierce, but the words rang hollower with each passing week. Tommy, still hauling loads across the state, called sporadically, his voice crackling over the line from some truck stop near Lubbock. "Keeping my eyes peeled, Elena. Every dirt road looks like it could be the one." Sheriff Ray Caldwell had all but closed the case, filing it under presumed deceased after the holidays, though he stopped by once a month with updates that were more courtesy than substance. "No new leads, ma'am. That Arroyo's given up everything it had," he'd say, tipping his hat from the driver's seat of his cruiser, the engine idling rough against the gravel driveway. Elena nodded politely, but privately. She'd hired a private investigator out of her savings, a wiry ex-ranger named Lou Decker, who chain-smoked camels and drove a dusty Suburban plastered with bumper stickers from every rodeo circuit. Lou poked around the oil patch, interviewing Harlan's rivals and combing through lease documents for signs of foul play, but his reports were thin. A vague tip about a bar fight Harlan had broken up years back, nothing that stuck. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the sky a vast unblemished blue that mocked the lingering chill when the call came. Jake was in the study, maps spread across the desk as he plotted a new drilling site, when his satellite phone buzzed. An unknown number from Pecos County. He answered, expecting a supplier, but the voice on the other end was breathless, edged with urgency. "This Jake Reeves. Sheriff here. Deputy out on patrol just spotted something weird off County Road 412. Black F-350. Looks just like your daddy's. Engine's running, been idling there since who knows when. No plates visible but the VIN. You need to come see this." Jake's heart slammed against his ribs, the phone slipping in his grip. "What? That's impossible. The truck went into the Arroyo. Wrecked." The deputy paused, static hissing. "That's what we thought. But this one's untouched, son. Pristine. Get here quick." Word spread like wildfire through the ranch. Elena dropped the trowel in the garden, dirt caking her gloves as she rushed inside, her face draining of color. Mia, home for the day, grabbed her keys, the sedan kicking up dust as they piled in. Jake behind the wheel, Elena in the passenger seat clutching Harlan's bandana like a talisman. Rosa met them at the door, crossing herself. "Go, mija. I'll watch the house." The drive north took an hour that felt eternal, the highway blurring past pump jacks and wind farms, the cab thick with unspoken fears. "If it's his truck, how?" Mia whispered from the back, her voice small. Jake's knuckles whitened on the wheel. "Don't know, but if it's running, maybe he is too." County Road 412 was a forgotten ribbon of dirt snaking through scrubland 10 miles west of the Pecos, where the terrain dipped into shallow draws dotted with creosote and the occasional abandoned oil drum rusted to the earth. The deputy waited at the pull-off, his Tahoe blocking the lane, lights flashing lazy against the golden light of late afternoon. A handful of locals had gathered, ranchers and pickups, a news van from Odessa idling at a distance, their murmurs carrying on the wind like dry leaves. "Found it round noon," the deputy explained, a young kid named Torres with a fresh buzz cut and wide eyes. Rancher called it in, thought it was a breakdown. But no one's inside, doors unlocked, keys in the ignition. Been sitting here idling, AC blowing cold. Battery should have died by now, but it's purring like new. Jake approached first, his boots crunching on the gravel shoulder, the low rumble of the engine vibrating through the ground. There it was, Harlan's black F-350. King cab gleaming under a thin layer of dust, not a scratch on the paint. The leather seats visible through the open driver's window, untouched by mud or flood. The dashboard held the familiar clutter, Harlan's thermos upright in the cup holder, maps folded neatly, the satellite phone charging in its cradle. No blood, no debris, just the faint scent of coffee and aftershave wafting out. Elena gasped, hand flying to her mouth as she peered inside, tears spilling. "Oh God, it's his! How is this possible? We pulled the wreck. Tommy saw it go over." Torres nodded, flipping open a notepad. "That's the kicker. We ran the VIN, matches Harlan's registration, the one from the Arroyo. Belonged to a ghost rig, some abandoned lease vehicle that washed down in the flood. Storm mixed everything up. Deputies assumed it was yours in the chaos. Tommy must have seen the wrong truck in the rain." The words hung heavy, rewriting the nightmare. If the F-350 hadn't plummeted, then Harlan hadn't either. Jake circled the vehicle, heart racing, checking the undercarriage for tracks in the soft dirt. Faint ruts leading from the road, veering into the brush before vanishing. He drove here. After the storm. Why this spot? Sheriff Caldwell arrived as the sun dipped low, his cruiser skidding to a halt, face thunderous under the brim of his hat. He clapped Jake on the shoulder, peering into the cab. "Son of a... This changes everything. Forensics team en route. Prints, GPS logs, the works." Elena leaned against the truck's fender, the metal warm from idling, her fingers tracing the door handle as if Harlan might swing it open any second. "Where'd you go, darling? Why leave it like this?" Mia snapped photos on her phone, her law student's mind whirring. Abduction, amnesia. The rivals' shadows loomed larger now, that disputed lease a motive reborn. As dusk settled, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, the site buzzed with activity. Techs dusted for fingerprints, the truck's GPS revealing a erratic path, the lease site, then zigzagging back roads through the night of the storm, ending here at dawn. No calls logged after 4:17 p.m., but the odometer showed minimal miles, barely 20 since the last service. Tommy Ruiz pulled up in his semi, face ashen as he stared at the truck. "I swear, boss, that wreck, it looked just like this one. Lightning flashing, rain blinding. Thought it was over." Guilt twisted his features, but Jake waved it off. "Storm tricked us all, Tommy. He's out there." The Discovery rippled outward, news crews swarming the ranch by nightfall, headlights cutting through the dark as Elena fielded questions from the porch. Hope surged, fragile and fierce, mingling with fresh terror. What had Harlan seen, or fled from, to abandon his lifeline here in the middle of nowhere? The idling engine, now silenced by the techs, echoed in their minds like a heartbeat paused mid-beat. For the first time in months, the silence of the plains felt charged, pregnant with secrets waiting to spill. Harlan Reeves wasn't lost to the flood. He had vanished by choice, or force, into the vast, unforgiving heart of Texas. The months following the discovery of Harlan Reeves' untouched F-350 on that dusty stretch of County Road 412 unfolded like a slow-burning fuse across the West Texas oil fields, igniting questions that scorched the family's fragile peace. By summer 2024, the ranch had become a hub of renewed scrutiny. Pickup trucks from the sheriff's office and private investigators kicking up gravel daily, their tires crunching over the sun-baked driveway under a sky that stretched endlessly blue. Elena Reeves stood on the porch more often now, her arms crossed tight against the midday heat, watching as techs combed through the truck's innards for the 100th time. The vehicle sat in the barn, cordoned off like a crime scene, its black paint gleaming under the harsh fluorescence, engine long silenced, but its secrets still humming in the air like the distant thrum of a rig. Forensics had painted a picture both tantalizing and maddening. The GPS logs confirmed Harlan had driven away from the lease site after the storm's peak, navigating slick back roads in the pouring rain. His path erratic but deliberate, swerving onto forgotten farm-to-market roads that paralleled the Pecos, avoiding the highway entirely. The final stop at dawn on County Road 412 showed no signs of distress. The truck had idled there for hours, AC running full blast against the cooling night, as if Harlan had stepped out for a smoke and never returned. Fingerprints lifted from the steering wheel and door handles matched his alone, no others, no smudges from a struggle. The satellite phone, fully charged, held deleted texts from Tommy about the site visit, But the call log ended abruptly at 4:17 p.m., the day of the storm. A brief, static-laced connection to an unlisted number in Midland. Couldn't trace it. Sheriff Ray Caldwell admitted one sweltering afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow as he leaned against the barn door, his mustache beaded with perspiration. Burner phone, probably tossed, but it wasn't a wrong number. Harlan initiated it. Elena absorbed the details in the kitchen that evening, the air thick with the scent of Rosa's simmering pozole, steam rising from the stove like ghosts from the past. Jake paced the tiled floor, his work boots leaving faint dirt tracks, while Mia sat at the table, laptop open to case files she'd pulled from public records. So he made it through the storm unscathed, Jake said, his voice rough with a mix of relief and fury. Drove all night, then parks in the middle of nowhere. Why not come home? Why not call? Elena stirred the pot slowly, her reflection wavering in the stainless steel, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. Something spooked him, mijo. That lease, those rivals. Maybe he saw something out there he wasn't supposed to. Rosa crossed herself at the sink, her hands sudsy from dishes. More trouble followed him from town. Remember those whispers about poached workers? Harlan had a code. He wouldn't play dirty. The oil patch buzzed with speculation, from the dusty lots of Midland's diners to the shadowed corners of the Watering Hole, where neon flickered over half-empty glasses of whiskey. Tommy Ruiz, back on the rigs part-time to help Jake, nursed a shiner at the bar one Friday night, the jukebox crooning an old George Strait tune about lost highways. "I keep thinking about that call," he told a cluster of roughnecks, his tattoos flexing as he gripped the bottle. "What if Harlan was warning someone, or getting warned? Storm cover for a meet?" The men nodded, faces weathered like old leather, sharing glances heavy with the weight of the unknown. Rivals like the out-of-state outfit that snagged the lease denied involvement, their suits from Houston issuing bland statements through spokesmen. Tragic case, but no connection to our operations. Yet Lou Decker, the private eye, dug deeper, his Suburban rumbling through Andrews and Odessa, chain-smoking as he interviewed ex-employees. One guy says Harlan confronted a scout from the big boys a week before, caught him tampering with a survey marker. Lou reported to Elena over coffee on the porch, the windmill creaking lazily behind him. Harlan threatened to go public. Could be motive, but no proof. Media frenzy peaked in July when a national true crime podcast descended on the ranch, microphones thrust like probes into the family's raw nerves. Elena granted one interview in the living room, the space still scented with Harlan's aftershave from the bottle on his dresser, sunlight slanting through lace curtains onto the worn couch. "He was a fighter," she said, her voice steady but laced with tremor, hands folded in her lap. "Whatever happened, he didn't go quiet. We're piecing it together. For him." The episode went viral, tips flooding the sheriff's tip line. A drifter in a Pecos motel claiming to have seen a man matching Harlan's description arguing with suited types. A blurry trail cam photo from a ranch gate showing a black truck vanishing into the scrub. Most were duds, amnesiacs or opportunists. But one stuck. A gas station clerk in Monaghan's recalling Harlan filling up the F-350 post-storm, looking jumpy, eyes darting like he expected company. No footage, but the timestamp lined up with the GPS. By fall, the investigation had broadened. FBI consulted for interstate angles, though they classified it low priority without violence. Jake expanded Reeves' drilling cautiously, hiring a security firm to shadow leases, the pump jacks now guarded like sentinels under floodlights that pierced the starry nights. Mia, interning at a firm specializing in corporate fraud, filed subpoenas for the rivals' records, her determination a fire kindled from grief. "If they pushed him out, we'll nail him," she told Elena during a weekend visit, the two women walking the garden paths where autumn leaves crunched underfoot, the air crisp with the promise of cooler winds. Elena nodded, plucking a late tomato, its skin warm from the fading sun. "Your dad would be proud. But I just want him back, Mia. Answers without him feel empty." Tommy found solace in the roads, his semi hauling loads under vast skies, radio tuned to AM stations crackling with storm updates. He'd stop at the arroyo sometimes, now a dry gash healed by time, staring at the spot where he'd thought Harlan lost. "You drove away, boss," he'd mutter to the wind, bandana knotted around his neck. "Left us thinking the worst. What were you running from?" Sheriff Caldwell, buried in paperwork at the station, kept the file active, a dog-eared folder on his desk amid coffee rings and wanted posters. "We're closer than before," he'd say during monthly check-ins, his cruiser parked nose-in to the ranch gate, dust settling like fine powder. But Texas is big, swallows secrets easy. Today, in the quiet rhythm of the Permian Basin, Harlan's case lingers as an open wound, the truck a relic in the barn, its odometer frozen at that fateful dawn. Elena tends the ranch with quiet resolve, the family bound tighter by the mystery, their evenings filled with talks that weave hope and doubt. What we know is Harlan survived the storm, chose the shadows, and vanished without a fight, or perhaps in one too subtle to see. The oil keeps flowing, the winds whisper across the plains, but the truth remains buried, waiting for the right gust to unearth it. As the sun dips low over the Permian Basin, casting long shadows across the endless flats where pump jacks nod like weary sentinels, the story of Harlan Reeves settles into the kind of quiet that West Texas knows best. The hush after a dust devil spins itself out, leaving only questions hanging in the dry air. It's been over a year now since that black F-350 idled alone on County Road 412, its engine a low hum that pulled the family from the depths of grief into a new, sharper uncertainty. The ranch house stands much as it did, stucco walls bleached by the relentless sun, the wraparound porch where Elena still sits most evenings, a shawl draped over her shoulders against the cooling breeze. The windmill creaks out back, turning lazy circles, and the scent of creosote rises from the earth after rare afternoon showers, mingling with the faint tang of oil that never quite leaves the air. Elena has aged in subtle ways, lines etching deeper around her eyes, her dark hair streaked with more silver than before. She tends the garden with a mechanical grace, hands calloused from weeding rows of peppers and tomatoes that thrive despite the odds, much like the family itself. Mornings find her on the porch with a cup of black coffee, the steam curling up to meet the dawn light that paints the horizon in soft pinks and golds. Jake and Sarah live on site now, their toddler, little Harlan, chasing shadows across the yard, his laughter a bright thread in the tapestry of loss. "Gampa's truck!" the boy squeals sometimes, pointing to the barn where the F-350 sits under a tarp, a forbidden relic that Jake checks weekly, as if it might whisper new clues. Jake's taken the reins of Reeves' drilling fully, his broad frame filling Harlan's old office chair, maps and ledgers spread before him under the desk lamp's warm glow. The company endures, rigs humming through the boom, but success tastes bittersweet without Harlan's gravelly approval. Mia comes home less often these days, her law career pulling her to Austin's bustling courts, but she calls every Sunday, her voice crackling over the line from a high-rise apartment where city noise bleeds through the windows. "Mom, I got a lead on that burner number. Traced it to a shell company tied to the rivals," she'll say, excitement edging her words, though the trails always dead-end in paperwork and denials. Elena listens, nodding into the receiver, her free hand tracing the rim of Harlan's bandana, folded neatly on the kitchen table. "Keep at it, Mija." For him. Rosa still bustles in with pots of menudo on weekends, the spicy aroma filling the house, drawing the family to the table where stories flow like the pozole, tales of Harlan's stubborn grit, his quiet generosities, the way he'd tip his hat to strangers on dusty roads. "He was the rock," Rosa says one crisp autumn evening, steam rising from her bowl as leaves skitter across the porch. But even rocks crack under pressure. Tommy Ruiz drifts in and out like a ghost on the wind, his semi parked in the driveway during rare layoffs. Tattoos faded a bit from the sun, but his eyes still sharp with regret. He's married now, a quiet ceremony at a chapel in Odessa, but the roads call him back, each mile a meditation on that stormy night. "I dream about it sometimes," he confessed to Jake over beers on the porch one starlit night, the crickets chorusing around them, bottles sweating in the humid air, the truck going over, but now I know it didn't. What if I'd chased after him instead of assuming the worst? Jake claps his shoulder, the gesture firm. You saved your own skin, Tommy. Dad wouldn't have wanted it any other way. Their talks turned to the what-ifs. Did Harlan stumble into something bigger than a lease dispute? Corporate espionage, maybe, or threats from environmental watchdogs he'd crossed? The oil patch is full of shadows. Deals cut in back rooms where the whiskey flows and loyalties shift like sand. Sheriff Ray Caldwell retired last spring, handing the badge to a younger deputy with fresh eyes, but he still drives out to the ranch in his old pickup, the bed rattling with fishing gear. They sit on the porch steps sharing thermoses of coffee as the sun climbs, his mustache grayer now. File's cold, Elena. But I keep it on my shelf, he says, voice low and steady. That call at 417, it's the key. Harlan was onto something, or someone was onto him. Elena nods, her gaze fixed on the arroyo in the distance, now a dry vein snaking through the mesquite, healed over but scarred. He drove away from us, Ray. Left the truck running like he planned to come back. Why park it there of all places? Middle of nowhere, no tracks leading away. Ray rubs his chin, the stubble rasping. Amnesia from the storm? Hit his head? Wandered off? Or foul play? Someone forces him out, takes him quiet-like. No struggle in the cab says it wasn't violent, but Texas is big enough to hide bodies and secrets alike. The media storm has ebbed, the podcast episode gathering dust in archives, though online forums buzz with theories. Amateur sleuths mapping the GPS route, speculating on hidden wells or cartel ties that stretch from the border up through the basin. Elena avoids it all, focusing on the tangible, the ranch's creaky floors, the pump jacks' rhythm, the family's quiet strength. Holidays bring them together. Thanksgiving with brisket smoking on the grill, mesquite flames crackling under a sky ablaze with stars, Jake carving the meat while Mia recites case updates, little Harlan giggling at the turkey's wishbone snap. To Dad, Jake toasts 1 year, glasses clinking, voices thick. Wherever you are, Elena raises hers, tears glistening. Come home, darling. Yet the questions linger like heat haze on the horizon, blurring the line between hope and haunting. Did Harlan flee a threat, protecting his family by vanishing into the vastness? Was it a rival's hand, silencing a man who knew too much about tampered surveys or stolen claims? Or something simpler, a breakdown under the oil game's pressure, a man walking into the scrub to clear his head, only to be claimed by dehydration or accident. The truck's pristine state mocks them, keys in the ignition, thermos untouched, as if Harlan stepped out for a moment and the world paused. No ransom notes, no sightings confirmed, just echoes in the wind that whispers across the plains. In the end, Harlan Reeves's disappearance isn't just a mystery, it's a mirror to the fragility of the lives we build on shifting ground. The Reeves family endures, bound by love and the unyielding Texas spirit, but the ache remains, a quiet storm brewing in their hearts. What really happened that dawn on County Road 412? Will the truth ever surface, like oil from a dry hole? As the sun sets on another day, the basin holds its breath, waiting. And so do they.